The products that financial planners sell, what do they predominantly sell? A managed what? Managed fund. In the US might be called a mutual fund, but in Australia generally you call them managed funds. Okay? So if we look at this industry and say, well, what we're trying to understand is why aren't most people wealthy? I believe this is the second key reason. Jot this down. I call this the wealth myth. And you'll see this in Australia all the time, argued every weekend in the papers. In other words, a typical financial planner. Now, there's always exceptions. There's some very good financial planners out there. But I would always say that someone's independently wealthy. My mentor always said, Jamie, if you want to become wealthy, he said, you can do what most people do. Go and see a financial planner. But as you're sitting there across from a financial planner, you should be thinking, if this person can show me how to retire one day, live my dreams, even perhaps become a millionaire if you want to do that, then the obvious question is, why haven't they done it themselves? Who thinks that's a fair enough question? Okay. Now, I don't mean go out there and pick on all financial planners, but you just got to understand that most of them are not trained at a high level in investing or not successful investors. The ones that are, worth listening to. That's what my mentor said, and that's what I do. I mean, I have financial specialists around me on my team to achieve the results that I achieve, but they're all independently successful at what they do. They're not just hiding behind a piece of paper that says, fantastic, I can give advice on money. Who's following what I'm saying here? Okay? So in other words, the key I find in investing, taking advice off anyone is risky. You say, well, why are we here today? We're here to, there's a difference between, here's my understanding, there's a difference between education and advice. Make sense? In other words, there's a difference between teaching someone how to fish and then to hand them a fish. Makes sense, doesn't it? And I think there's a clear the difference between that, and that's one of the keys we're going to look at. If I was a financial planner, and a typical financial planner, what I would try and do is, my goal would be to sell a financial product, sell an investment, a managed fund predominantly. And they want to sell that because they make what? Make commission. But when you think about we're talking an industry here that's one of the most lucrative industries on the planet. In other words, if you could sell a product but you only have to sell it once but get paid year after year after year, who thinks that would be a good product? Okay, it'd be a great business. And in fact, that's happened. It's commission year after year after year. And in many cases, that's the way it works. So what they will do is they'll show you an example. They will show the example of the share market, for instance, because managed funds are predominantly invested where? In the share market. So if a financial planning industry will predominantly say the share market will go up and down like this, but it will always go higher. They'll show a graph like that. And they'll say, basically, to steer you towards them, they'll say, statistically, the share markets outperform property about 13% per annum statistically over the last 150 years, and the property market's only averaged something around 6%. Something around that. That's the sort of argument that they'll put out there and things like that. So what will happen is then they'll say, but investing is risky. You don't want to go out and do it yourself. You're better off leaving it up to the experts. Now, the average person hasn't been taught at school and doesn't know much about money. They're so busy working just to pay the bills. It's like, well, true, I don't know anything about money. Let's leave it up to the experts because they're licensed. That must be safe because the government told me to go and see them. They must know what they're doing with our money. Who's following what we're doing here? And most people go, yeah, that's okay. And what they'll end up is they're paying commission. They really don't understand their investment, but someone else is managing it for them. And it sounds like a solution that's going to, and the idea is that they'll say, look, we'll look after it, invest it here and keep it investing. And at age 65, you can cash it in, retire, and you'll live the good life. That's basically the plan. Okay? They'll buy, hold, and what I call pray, that the market keeps going. So in other words, and then they'll say, let's say an example, you've got 100,000 here, you get into a managed fund, and you're going to make 13% average, so you're making about 13K a year. Over here in real estate, you're only making, say, 6%, so you're only making 6K. The clear winner is you should be with us. Don't worry about investing directly in the real estate market or the share market because we can handle it for you and it's all taken care of. That's basically the pitch. And, but what I consider is this as one of the wealth myths. The wealth myth is this, and this has held a lot of people back from being as wealthy as they could, especially in Australia in recent years, is if we're going to buy real estate, as an example, a house, do we wait to save up the whole 100,000? Let's say it's a $100,000 house. Do we wait to save up the whole 100,000 or do we go out and put down a deposit? We put down a deposit of usually what, 10%? 10, 20%? Let's say 10%. So we put down, say, 10% deposit. which is 10K, okay, in that example, to buy a $100,000 property. If you only get 6%, let me ask a question. Who has had a house or investment property in the last 5, 10 years that's gone up by more than 6% in a 12-month period? Okay. Everyone, unless you burn it down, okay? Make sense? So that's fairly conservative, okay? But if that's all it was, $10,000 outlay into that, and you only got a 6% growth on that property, is it 6% return on your money, or what percentage return on your money is it? Is it 6% or 60%? It's 60% return on your money. If you invest $10,000 as a deposit into a property and it only goes up by 6%, that's $6,000 growth on a $10,000 outlay is a 60% return on your money. Make sense? So, now, argument there is not to say, oh, real estate's better than the share market. The argument is to say this, that we have two choices.